Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you all. Yeah, this is OCD North Carolina's OCD lecture series, and I don't have a lot in the way of announcements other than just kind of putting in a plug for next month's lecture. Yeah, in December we have Stacy Greeter, who is a psychiatrist who treats OCD, and she's going to talk a bit about medication for OCD and I believe it will be Star Wars themed. I put in a plug for Star Wars, but Stacy is a really fun presenter and always finds fun ways to present the information in very engaging ways. So I think it will be Star Wars, but we'll see. Um, but yeah, that will be next month. But yeah, let's talk about perinatal OCD. Erin Jones is our lovely presenter for this month. I didn't, I'm sure you submitted a bio at some point, Erin, but I am ignoring it because I know of all the things anyways. Yeah, Erin is an amazing clinician at Bull City Anxiety and OCD Treatment Center. She has been on the OCD North Carolina board for couple years at least, something somewhere along those lines. And before officially joining the board, she was organizing the OCD walks in Asheville. Was very active in the OCD community, was organizing the walks, and then joined the board and has been doing lots of wonderful things ever since. She also runs the intensive treatment program at Bull City Anxiety and does lots of other things on top of it all. I think this is her third talk in a row. She spoke at the OCD conference on Sunday, did a talk for NASW yesterday, and here she is doing a talk for OC North Carolina. So she's a wonderful clinician. She's a great speaker, uh, and is very passionate about perinatal mental health. Yeah, without further ado, Erin, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ben, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. My name's Erin. It's nice to meet you all. Um, I'm gonna get into it. I'll try to tab over and look at the chat, but I have my slides on a different tab, so uh, we'll try to save some time at the end for questions. So if you're writing anything, I just may not see it till a little before 8, but I am so excited. When I was thrilled that Ben asked me to step in from the board and give a talk as part of our lecture series this fall. And I think the conversation went exactly like, "Hey, Erin, do you want to do one of the lectures this fall?" And I said, "Perinatal OCD." This topic is so important. It's near and dear to my heart, and came up with the title "Understanding Perinatal OCD" because I think it's an area that's less understood. So I really hope that if you have lived experience, that this helps you feel understood. And if you're here to learn, just thank you so much. This will get posted on our OCD North Carolina YouTube page, and I really hope that a couple years down the line, when people are watching this, they're just like, "Oh, this is common knowledge. Everybody knows this already." That's what we're shooting for. And before I, get started, I want anybody to know who is watching this that maybe you don't have kids yet, or you have OCD and you're thinking about uh, getting pregnant or growing your family. I want to make sure that your takeaway from this is not that you should be wary of having kids because of having OCD. You can make your own decisions for growing your family, but I want you all to know that having OCD does not disqualify anybody from being a parent. That's very important to remember. All right, let's get into it. So we love a plan. I'm going to go over a couple different things, what perinatal OCD is, so some stats, and we're going to break some stigma throughout. I'm going to talk about a lot of different common presentations in this population, how we treat it, and ways to get more support. So, what is perinatal OCD? I always like to do a slide like this when we're thinking about OCD in general. Look at some of these behaviors, checking the baby monitor, praying, taking a pregnancy test, doing kick counts. That's when a pregnant person is asked to count the number of times their baby is kicking within a period of time to make sure they're staying active. Just think which of these things seem more OCD or seem like compulsions or things that could be easy to do more repetitively or lose track of. It's good to think about, and think about this as I go over these topics as well. So if you're newer to the OCD community, welcome. We're glad you're here to learn. In terms of that list of behaviors, it doesn't really matter what the behavior is, but whether or not it's functioning in this OCD cycle as to whether or not something is compulsive. So OCD consists of two main things: the presence of obsessions. These are recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images. They are intrusive and unwanted, meaning ego dystonic, separate from one's worldview. They lead to distress, anxiety. And then there's urges to perform and the performance of compulsions, which can either be mental or physical attempts to suppress or neutralize the intrusive thoughts. Folks can do things that are obsessive and compulsive sometimes. We may get stuck on things can be sticky. But the D in OCD is disorder, where this cycle becomes impairing, it's time consuming, and it leads people to have a hard time doing different things in their life. So it's important to remember what OCD is in general before we get into perinatal OCD. Perinatal OCD. So we didn't need any AI generated images. We've got the real thing right here. That's my daughter, Ellie, a couple years ago. So perinatal OCD is when it's still OCD, but when this takes place during the perinatal period. So when I'm talking about perinatal, I'm referring to throughout pregnancy and the year after birth. So pregnancy and postpartum. Many of us parents know that postpartum is forever. I think, parents, moms, anyone with kids can still experience OCD that has to do with all different walks of childhood outside of that postpartum period. So I don't want anybody to think, well, I have OCD, but my kids are older. This can still impact everybody, but for the sake of research and just this especially vulnerable time, when we're talking about perinatal OCD, we're talking about this time period. And we're not really sure exactly why it happens more during this period, but we have some ideas. It's likely caused by the many hormonal changes that take place during this time, specifically in oxytocin during and postpartum after pregnancy, which is related to the neurotransmitter serotonin, which impacts OCD. The most obvious thing I'll say during this talk is that having a baby is a big adjustment in life. So there's a lot of environmental changes that take place. You're responsible for growing and caring for this new fragile human being. So that can be exciting and a little scary. So it would make sense that if OCD can flare up or latch on during certain periods of life, that it could happen during this time. Some numbers that are really important to know. 2 to 3% of moms of parents are likely affected by perinatal OCD. We think that it's a lot more. And that's important to remember because a lot of, when you look at the studies, there's these averages of 2 to 3% of women in the perinatal period having OCD. The thing is, we do also know from other studies that many people with OCD are afraid to report their symptoms because of stigma. Either they may not know that the themes of their intrusive thoughts are OCD. They could be worried that the worries, which I'll give many examples of soon, could be misinterpreted as, actual worry or harm to the child, which it's not. So I think it's hard to tell if that number could likely be a lot more due to providers not screening enough or at all, and for folks feeling afraid to disclose their symptoms, or again, not even knowing. When you also look at studies, there's something called weighted averages, where certain criteria is put into studies and the averages are kind of more of what we really think it is. And then those numbers are much, much higher than 2 to 3%. OCD, perinatal OCD is 1.5 to 2 times as likely as it is in the general population. So I think it's less understood and talked about during this time period, but it's more likely to occur. And that's with this data that we already have. So again, it's probably more than that. And I always think this is interesting to talk about. 70 to 100% of women experience intrusive thoughts during the perinatal period. So this isn't associated with OCD, but just having intrusive thoughts in general. I think it's 100%. I think intrusive thoughts are universal, but as to whether or not they're OCD, could be differ depending on the person. So we really need to normalize and spread the word about intrusive thoughts in general, and also what makes it OCD, so that people can understand and feel supported and not be misunderstood, and to know what to do with them. But of women in the perinatal period with OCD, at least 50% report having harm related obsessions. So really important numbers. So a couple of stigmas to bust here. Perinatal OCD is not exclusive to moms. We're talking about moms because of the perinatal population, and that it is more likely to occur in moms and birthing parents. When I say moms, I mean birthing parents, but it can happen to dads or parents of any gender identity, any non-birthing parents, so people who adopt or have babies by surrogacy. We have another real picture of a dad there, holding his new baby, looking right at him with eyes wide open. They were bald twins for like 2 years. He's still bald, but the baby's not. Perinatal OCD is not just new parent worries, in quotes. So, of course, I think parents can be very worried about their baby. You bring home your new baby and you're checking if they're breathing, you're worried about their sleep, you're adjusting. Though when something becomes OCD, think more about the increased distress, the frequency, and the duration of it. Generally, if parents are adjusting to the adaptive worries of having a new baby, those circumstances tend to resolve themselves. You get adjusted. But OCD symptoms are there all throughout the day. They're impairing in one's life. But we also don't want to attribute excessively worrying about something to just being a parent. Of course, worries are common as parents, but don't let anybody tell you that you're supposed to just, sit there being riddled with anxiety all the time. That's not how we're made to function. It's also not the same thing as postpartum anxiety. It's very, very similar, though. That impacts 1 in 5 women in the postpartum period, probably more. Postpartum anxiety versus OCD is more general worries. It can feel like you're just kind of worried all of the time about a wide variety of things, whereas OCD tends to fit more into that compulsive cycle. They're very similar and can occur quite a bit together, but still important to distinguish the differences. Perinatal OCD also is not postpartum psychosis. This is another condition that is very important to differentiate from, and I'll explain why. With postpartum psychosis, the thoughts are ego syntonic. So when somebody is experiencing thoughts or worries during an episode of psychosis, they tend to have more hallucinations, delusions, mood swings. They're buying into their thoughts and beliefs. They really believe that these things are happening, and it's these fears are not based in reality. Because of that and the presence of delusions, and again, this just separation from reality, it's really considered a medical emergency. So if somebody doesn't demonstrate insight that their thoughts are, not irrational, and people with OCD tend to, I know that this probably isn't going to happen, but it just feels like I have to do this compulsion, or just in case, or I just stay stuck on it. Folks with postpartum psychosis are really like deep in their thoughts and see it as reality. It can happen within usually the first 2 weeks of birth, and it's important to distinguish because this is a medical emergency. If somebody is experiencing postpartum psychosis, they need to see a doctor and potentially go to the hospital. Can be treated. It's about 1 in 1,000 births, I believe, is postpartum psychosis. Perinatal OCD, folks often worry that it is psychosis because of a lot of the thoughts pertain to like, what if I harm my kid, or what if I wanted to? But there's more of a what if component. There's worry about those things happening. I'll explain some examples in a little bit. But again, OCD thoughts tend to be ego dystonic, meaning they're separate from one's worldview. You could still doubt, like, what if I want to do this thing, or what if I suddenly lose control and it happens? But there's this fear and this, it probably won't happen, but I don't want to take my chances. We'll be glad to answer more questions about the differences if that's coming up for folks. Probably the most important thing, perinatal OCD is not reflective of your worth as a parent. OCD isn't reflective of your worth as a person. It's not a personality trait or a flaw or a quirk. Please remember that you are not your thoughts, and having intrusive thoughts does not make you any less worthy as a person or as a parent. So I'm going to break down some common presentations of perinatal OCD. I'm going to get into quite a bit, but please know that this is not an exhaustive list. I want to normalize and show that it's OCD in general is not within these, exact themes. Perinatal OCD kind of gets a rep for being about the baby. So more of the examples that I give will be about children or the baby, but I also want folks to know that, again, it's really just OCD during this time period, so it can still be about essentially anything. Okay, so let's get into it. So some common themes or fears. A common theme of OCD in general, especially more so during this time period, is involving contamination. So this could be fears around dirt, illness, germs spreading between others or to the baby. What if I'm carrying germs that make my child or others sick? I think babies are pretty fragile. I think especially if you have a baby during flu season or they don't have their vaccines yet, it can feel pretty scary, and one could have more caution around others coming into contact with the baby. I noticed, like, during having a baby during COVID, a lot more people in the grocery store were like, is it okay if I come closer, instead of like automatically touching the baby? But, this something, again, is more of an obsession, or puts that capital D disorder in OCD when it's more time consuming and impairing, makes it more difficult to do things in your everyday life. So this usually involves compulsions like cleaning, researching, checking your body or the baby excessively. A lot of contamination OCD I see kind of continuing on or coming up later in childhood for mothers and parents when kids are going to school. A lot of fear about kids getting sick at school, which again is very common in and of itself, but it can turn into an obsession if you're really checking your kids, worried about sleeping at night. What if my kids get sick? A lot of kind of like questioning or reassurance seeking of what if they're going to get sick. And it kind of just feels like you know that it's going to happen at some point, but you're just always on guard for trying to know when it's going to happen. Right. Just like takes up a lot of life. There's also something called emotional contamination that's really, really common, but not very well known. And I would describe it like fear of the child or others getting contaminated in some other way besides illness. So this could be like their personality, their spirit. It could be like their life or their weekend. For example, if I don't do these rituals that OCD is telling me to do, my kid will just develop these traits I don't like. Or if we walk behind somebody that I have a bad thought around, then my kid is going to become generally contaminated from them. Certain places can be contaminated, certain parts of life or the weekend can be contaminated. So it can really be about anything. And again, what makes this different than something like a delusion and psychosis is that generally people know, okay, I know this probably is like irrational, or I always hear like I'm a smart person, but like I still just feel like these things are so real. And um, so that's kind of where there's that different insight with OCD. Another very common theme or fear during this time is harm OCD. And these things can certainly overlap. Contamination is certainly related to harm. What if I'm not careful enough, like harm by neglect? What if I hurt my baby? This is somebody who very much doesn't want to do these things. They're scared that they will. What if I just like suddenly, snap or lose control or act on impulse? I don't want to. These thoughts are scary, but just what does it mean about me that I have them? What if I die and I can't care for my child? So some common compulsions could be avoiding caring for the baby. Like, I don't know, I'm having these scary thoughts. Maybe somebody else should take care of the baby. I could be dangerous. Um, Avoiding sharp objects, just any activities that could be associated with harm uh, to oneself or the child. So like cooking, caring for the baby. Also think like this is why it's so important to just normalize the presence of intrusive thoughts in general during this time period. I don't know about you all, but I mean, I have two kids, and even still, if I hold a newborn baby, my first thought is like, I'm gonna drop this baby. um, I'm very like used to holding babies, but you could still have that thought, right? And people can get all sorts of just disturbing or um, intrusive thoughts during this time, and I don't think we talk about it enough. But normalizing them in general, but especially when it's really becoming OCD. And that's why I think talking about these things more can help people recognize them and see like this isn't about you as a person or a parent. It's a thought that you're having. Okay, so continuing on, another common theme during this time would be labeled as like just right OCD, and that could be kind of like perfectionism, like needing things to be in order, symmetrical. Uh, Maybe not always a core fear, but just like or else things won't be right. I won't be able to get by. And this is different than somebody just having a more orderly or organized personality. This is where it just feels like the things have to be done. Some common compulsions, but could be many more, would be making lists, ordering, arranging. When I say detailed decision making, I mean, like really just like grueling over the decision making process excessively, what things to buy, what to do in the routine, etc. Unacceptable thoughts kind of apply to all of this, but this is considered more of like the taboo thoughts category, also often not talked enough, but it's really, really important to include on this list because it happens a lot with OCD, especially perinatal OCD. So generally being fearful of unwanted, disturbing thoughts, often aggressive or sexual in nature. So we talked about harm thoughts a little bit, but could be disturbing, violent thoughts. Maybe somebody's like changing their baby's diaper and they have a thought about their baby's body, or they have an unwanted sexual thought come up. Especially if this is a time in one's life where this is really like the first time where somebody's just having like an odd, disturbing, intrusive thought. They might think, what? Like, does this mean something? Like, am I attracted to my baby? Am I having inappropriate thoughts? Again, this person's not. This is an intrusive thought. This is OCD. Sometimes it's often called POCD, pedophilia OCD. It is a fear of this unwanted thing happening, not actual attraction or inappropriate behavior. Very, very common and important to talk about. So some compulsions, especially just having this really like disturbing, unwanted thought recurring, would be maybe trying to stop the thought, which, doesn't work. Avoiding changing the baby or just anything that could trigger that thought process, reassurance seeking, research, things like that. Have some more. um, one area that I see a lot with folks that I work with, but I don't tend to see a lot on like lists online and that sort of thing, is relationship OCD. I think when you read about relationship OCD, you tend to see it more about romantic relationships, obsessing over like, do I love my partner? Am I with the right person? Excessive doubt about a relationship. This can happen with any relationship, including a mother and a baby. What if I don't love my child enough? Even just stemming into like, what if I'm not I don't know, like going through pregnancy the right way? Am I not like feeling the right way? But yeah, what if I don't love my child enough? So a lot of checking, rumination, reassurance seeking. I've known people to like go back and look at pictures a lot of their kids to like check if they're feeling the right way or loving them enough. And of course, like again, throughout the postpartum period, you could have all sorts of fluctuating feelings about your kid, but this is more of it's a lingering, it's a sticky obsession and worry. Scrupulosity is when fears come up about, could be like the baby's soul or anything pertaining to more of like a religious component, even if somebody is not practicing in that religion that they're worried about. Uh, what if I don't do things a certain way, or I don't do this compulsion, and then I'm upsetting a higher power? And it's very like black and white in that way of like, okay, well, if I don't do this thing, then what if I'm going to hell or sending my baby to hell? Compulsions could be praying, and this is praying where it feels like an or else, not praying because it brings you peace, and that's a part of your religious practices, confessing thoughts, or some of the other things from this list. Morality also goes along with scrupulosity, obsessions around being a good or a bad parent, a lot of asking for reassurance, social media research. This isn't typically a like categorized separate OCD theme, but I have sleep on here because I also meet many, many people who are parents, pregnant or postpartum, and obsess over sleep. So whether that's their sleep, the baby's sleep, pressure about like you need to sleep when the baby sleeps, all these things that come up, but more of where it really just stems into this obsessive place of like, now something bad's going to happen if the baby doesn't sleep, or if I don't sleep, or if I don't do these things a certain way, which probably then makes people lose sleep. So it really sucks to go through. This is where like the monitor checking comes in, either like with harm OCD or the sleep obsessions, having a very excessively rigid sleep routine or just daily routine in general, superstitious behaviors like if I don't feed my kid this specific thing or use these set pajamas, they won't sleep. Um, Things like that. So there could be many, many more things beyond this list, but I wanted to really expand beyond things like contamination and harm to help normalize just the variety of themes that can come up during this time period, and how it's really all OCD but can affect people in a lot of different ways. Okay, so we talked about what it is and a lot of examples. Let's talk about what we do about it. Fortunately, it's very treatable, as OCD in general is. So there's several components of treatment here. Mental health counseling, of course, using evidence-based treatment, ERP, which we'll talk about a little bit. Medication management, SSRIs. We have a great speaker coming next month to talk about meds. I'll talk about them a little bit. Support, very important. This area I'm not going to touch on as much today, but it's still very important that you work with your providers to, care for your general wellness. This isn't going to be like a fix for OCD, but it's all part of the plan of your, physical, emotional wellness, get everybody on the team together. I definitely recommend incorporating self-compassion, especially for folks in this population. Mom guilt is a thing. Excessive guilt and shame comes with OCD, and we don't need anybody, beating themselves up more because they're struggling with something. Okay, let's talk about ERP. I'm going to explain the picture so we don't get too distracted by it first. I've been waiting to use this for something, and then I finally got to use it for this. One of my parents took this picture and wrote this tiny little caption. It says, "I don't know about this." My daughter is sitting on the slide. She's about to do something she's scared of. She's not upset because it's time to go inside. She's scared of going down the slide. So that's like the face, you make before you're going to do something scary. We want to say like, bring it on, let's go for it. But she was like 2 years old, so it's okay. Many of us have had some tears come out during an exposure before. So ERP is the evidence-based part of the frontline treatment approach for OCD. It's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. You can check out the International OCD Foundation iocdf.org/treatment to get more details on what they recommend for various treatments. We're going to talk about ERP right now. In general, ERP involves two main parts. There's the exposure part, getting up on the slide, intentionally confronting the thoughts, images, objects, or situations that provoke that distress. So you're going to like get into that cycle and trigger it. If the thoughts or images are more of those like pretty taboo things that we came up with, one might imagine them or bring them up on purpose or write about them. We're not going to go kill anybody or anything. We want to be alive and keep working. Some types could be, again, imaginal, interoceptive, meaning like you bring on sensations in your body that you're working through. So maybe somebody with like a contamination or health anxiety is worried about their increased heart rate. So they might increase their heart rate, run around and do jumping jacks, and move through it without doing compulsions. In vivo exposures are when we get on the slide. Instead of thinking about it, we go do the thing that we can do tangibly in front of us. Response prevention is probably even more important. So then not only are we triggering that OCD cycle, but we are then not doing the compulsion, ritual, safety behaviors, avoidance behaviors that really confirm the threat and keep that cycle going. So we might like mess up the ritual or delay it, or let's like change the bedtime routine and switch it up a little bit. So we're gonna really work on not doing those things that reinforce the anxiety, and we're gonna move through that distress. If that picture was taken now, she would be upset about leaving the slide because now she doesn't want to get off of them. Here's some examples, and this is just like a snapshot. Let's say this is how like just one particular person would work on this for harm. We could do this for any of the things that were on the list that I brought up. So let's say this brave mom is going to work on some harm OCD with her therapist, and on her own, maybe she's going to write down some triggering words. She might change her baby's diaper, but while letting some of those scary thoughts be there. And I wrote things like avoid confessing, because we're going to not do any compulsions while we're doing the thing. Hold the baby while walking by the stairs. Do a craft with her daughter with scissors, which maybe those were labeled as dangerous. Prepare food for your family. Use knives. Put the child to bed. Let the partner keep the monitor. So we're getting some help with the family. We're doing things with the kids. You'll notice everything on this list is pretty everyday stuff, but could be extremely scary for this person. The expected SUDS, subjective unit of distress scale, those are the person's perceived ratings for how distressing they think these exposures will be. We don't always go in that set order, but we tend to start with things that feel like more doable challenges, and we go up from there. Hopefully you're doing ERP with a trained therapist, which I'll get to in a moment, but your therapist should be guiding you through these things. You should know what to do and feel empowered to do them on your own. And I will say, we can incorporate kids, bring the baby into the office. We can do stuff together. Always up for that. ERP does have a lot of misconceptions about it in general. I'm going to focus on some that pertain more to the perinatal population. Contrary to what some may think, ERP generally can absolutely be done during the perinatal period. It can be practiced throughout pregnancy and at any point postpartum. So that being said, flexible modifications can be made in terms of structure due to sleep, medical needs, etc. So yeah, if somebody's on bed rest, they've got a kid in the NICU, like maybe we're going to adjust things based on what the person needs. We may need to pause. But generally speaking, we can still do exposure therapy. We just need to work with somebody's schedule, make sure they're supported, have sessions either in telehealth or making sure we're just, maybe going gradually, doing whatever works, very much like a workout. We're just going to do what works for our client. I think things can be conditional for the person. We just don't want to assume that somebody can't do this treatment solely because they're pregnant and can't handle it. There are some rule outs for ERP, especially safety, or if somebody's not eating or not able to be in this outpatient setting with us. But again, generally speaking, don't tell a pregnant or postpartum person that they can't do something. Yeah, so we can make modifications, but it's doable. So psychoeducation about just even the presence of intrusive thoughts and what they are in general, and OCD is essential. So we need to teach more people about it. Thank you for being here. We're doing it now so that people can know what to expect and be ready to handle it. But even just to know, like, these things like thoughts are not representative of who you are as a person. And this is a really big time, of course, to include more supports, one's medical team, doulas, et cetera, because they're going to be there with this person in those postpartum settings. ERP is ethical, at least when done with a trained professional. But you'll notice everything on this list here, I think, is pretty ethical. This person with this harm obsession might feel that these things are pretty risky to do because of their fears. But we're not asking anybody to do anything that involves actual harm to themselves or others. I always tell my clients, you have that autonomy to decide what we're going to do. I'll never ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do. And yeah, it's empowering. These examples on this list were changing your baby's diaper, doing crafts with your kid, cooking for your family. These things are empowering. And we want to learn to do these things despite intrusive thoughts being there. Again, don't tell a pregnant person that they can't do something besides, dangerous things. It should include an OCD specialist. OCD specialists are well-trained. You should ask about specific training in an OCD provider. They're able to provide ERP ethically and reliably. This is really important. You should inquire about years they've spent treating OCD, what specialized trainings they've done, bonus points for the perinatal mental health certification through Postpartum Support International. Okay, medication management, not a prescriber. We have Stacy Greeter coming next month. She is one, but I do want to talk about meds a little bit because it's really important, kind of a hot topic in this population. I know a lot of folks will preemptively stop medication that's already helping them when they get pregnant. Definitely recommend consulting with a med provider before making that decision, because many medications can actually be started or continued during pregnancy for OCD. So a common question is, will medication for OCD harm my baby? Difficult if you're already having harm worries, but yeah, probably not. SSRIs are recommended as part of that frontline treatment, generally for OCD, in combination with ERP. Some people benefit from meds alone. Some people benefit from therapy alone. Majority of people benefit from both. Again, visit iocdf.org/treatment for more detail. SSRIs, like Zoloft, Lexapro, are the most studied meds in pregnancy and lactation than any other group in the perinatal population. So the data do not support increased risk of stillbirth, neonatal death, direct impact upon miscarriage, no consistent risk of, or increased risk of fetal malformations, abnormalities. The thing that folks need to consider is that, I've got a couple notes, major psychiatric disorders are associated with some of these risks and an increased risk of preterm labor. So it's important to think about what are the risks of not medicating when something could be helpful and generally safe with low risk. Thinking about the risk of medication versus not being medicated. There are some studies that show that, actually both antidepressants and untreated psychiatric disorders can have some modestly lower birth weight, but it's generally about 3 ounces less. Or if there's premature labor, the change in gestational age is 2 to 4 days on antidepressant use. So folks can look into those resources more and decide if that's enough of a risk. I would really recommend that you do your research. Don't make broad assumptions from one article or study. Work with a knowledgeable provider. Uh, you know, in we have in North Carolina, for example, we have the UNC Women's Mood Clinic. Work with somebody that has experience with this population, OCD. And again, consider the risks of medication versus the risks of being non-medicated. We want to be informed and supported rather than making decisions based on fear. Tough time. Yeah, and please talk to your doctor about taking Tylenol. Please manage your fevers. Yeah, we need some good science reminders out there. Let's talk about supporting people. Hopefully you're here also because you support people. We're glad you're here. Some ways to get support. Megan, I see your face on here. Join a support group, IOCDF, Postpartum Support International. I'll include them on the next slide, have directories for support groups. There's not only support groups for perinatal OCD through PSI, but also I think for dads, same-sex couples, infertility, all sorts of things. IOCDF has support groups for OCD. The group that I work with, Bull City Anxiety, bullcityanxiety.com. We have a virtual support group for individuals with OCD, for loved ones of those with OCD. They're free. So Megan and I, that orange picture there, we run a free monthly moms with OCD virtual support group. So this is not limited to any location or even the perinatal time. Any maternal figure with OCD is welcome. You can find it on Megan's website. Megan, you can plug in your website if you want. It's also on bullcityanxiety.com. There's a Google form on Google Meet, and we'd love to see you there. We meet on the fourth Thursday of each month, but if you're watching this live, we are meeting this Thursday because of Thanksgiving. It's a really lovely group. Just talking to other people who get it, especially in this particular population, is so important. Other moms, parents, but also people with OCD. Education for loved ones. So sharing resources, books, podcasts that you like, involving your loved ones in therapy or exposures. If you're okay with that, I think the best way that your loved ones can learn about your OCD is really through you. But there are some resources on, especially IOCDF. There's a huge list of them. I've heard a lot of people like the book Hello Baby, Goodbye Intrusive Thoughts by Jenny Yip. That's a perinatal OCD focused book. And yeah, connect members of your care team. So I recommend allowing collaboration between your OCD therapist and folks like your OB, doulas, et cetera. Get everybody together to support you, come up with a plan. Providers, I suggest that you keep doing things like this, get trained, again, through PSI, IOCDF. Just be proactive. Folks should, know that this is a thing. We know what to do with it when, we're able to expect it. When that intrusive thought comes up, then you know what it is. We need to screen for OCD. I know I was never asked about it in pregnancy and postpartum, at least by people in the medical field. I would have had to speak up myself. There's not one universal screening for perinatal OCD, though folks can use things like the OCI, obsessive compulsive inventory, perinatal anxiety screening scale. It's not like perfect in terms of screening for OCD, but it's definitely better than nothing. The best thing is to teach your patients about intrusive thoughts, give some examples, show that you know the difference between an intrusive thought versus a wanted egosyntonic thought. And you can welcome that more inviting space for folks to share and talk about what they're experiencing without fearing that you're going to think they actually want to harm your baby or that they're going to be reported, because that happens by mistake quite a bit. Some resources, some more. I've mentioned the International OCD Foundation quite a bit. That's your OCD resource hub, iocdf.org. You're attending this lecture as part of OCD North Carolina, which is our state's affiliate. We are ocdnc.org. The foundation has articles, walks, conferences, a directory for treatment, whether that's groups, therapists. I have the honor of being one of the leaders of a special interest group, SIG, called Moms with OCD. This is not a support group, but it's a group of moms out in the world who want to connect other moms with OCD to resources. We're also, I think, going to be working more on educating medical providers. So love that exists. I think, yeah, Krista's here somewhere. You don't have to say anything, but Krista's amazing. She's a part of that group too. Just, yeah, so many amazing people. So that could be something to check out. I think somebody's got the link in the chat. Thanks, Megan. Postpartum Support International is the other resource I've mentioned a bit, postpartum.net. They also have articles, awareness walks, an annual conference. They have free support groups online. They have a provider directory, the perinatal mental health certification. These are folks who have gone through training and testing to demonstrate that they have awareness of the presence and being able to screen for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So it could be especially important for just understanding all the special circumstances of this population, though I do still recommend looking for providers who specialize in OCD too. PSI has a helpline. The number is on here. It is not a crisis hotline, but it can help connect you with resources. I think you can call or text it and they get back to you within a couple of hours usually. And here's the number for the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. Of course, if someone is in crisis, please call Mobile Crisis or 988. But these are your resources. I know here we also have, again, places like the UNC Women's Mood Clinic. We have Anchor Perinatal in the Raleigh area for perinatal mental health. So yeah, some great resources. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. If anybody has any that they especially like, feel free to share in the chat too. You can come back and look at my references, or I can send you all of my med references too. So thank you so much. There's so much that I feel like each slide in this talk could have been its own talk, and we could get so much more into treatment and nuances. But yeah, really just wanted to normalize and squash as much stigma as possible. Thank you to the girls for being my non-AI photos. And here are some ways you can find me. I'll keep it up for a little bit. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes. I would love to open up the floor if anybody has any questions or comments. We got a little